What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jimmy, aka The Truth, and welcome to another episode of Run-DMZ, where we talk about cybersecurity with a focus on pen testing. My apologies for the late video. I had a work trip shortly after my second video, and with summer coming to an end and school starting again, it's been kind of hectic here at the house. But nonetheless, we're here today, and I got something special in store for you guys. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So if you've been following me on the school community, you should be familiar with lesson 1, where we talked about what pen testing is. And in that lesson, we went over authorization, scope, rules of engagement, and those kind of things. Those things are important because, rules of engagement, consent, non-disclosure agreements, etc., those are the documents that you need in order to conduct a legal penetration test or a legal pen test. Without that, it's unethical to conduct any kind of pen test and or illegal. Anyways, in that same lesson, we also talked about pen testing methodology, which we're going to go over here today in this video. My methodology was really four steps, and that's step 1, recon and enumeration. Step 2, exploitation or initial access, foothold. Step 3, post exploitation and privilege escalation. Talk about establishing persistence and then protesting to root or system, that kind of stuff. And then step 4 of the methodology is documentation and reporting. Take everything that you've done, learned, put it in a report, pass it on to the customer. Those 4 phases: recon enumeration, exploitation, post-exploitation, and reporting. I'm actually going to show you those steps, with the exception of the reporting, but at least steps 1 through 3 we're going to go over in this video right here today. Right, so in this lab, we have our target right here. Target IP is 10.129.94.174. Again, shout out to HackerBots. I'm using their platform for this exercise. We're going to roll right into step 1, which is recon and enumeration. So first things first, I want to open up a bash terminal. Try to make it nice for you guys. And go ahead and give it a ping. Make sure the host is live. And it's not. That's bad. Stand by. My bad. You have some technical difficulties. So disregard the last target IP. That did not work at all. But I had to reset the box. Anyways, this is our target: 10.129.153.170. So we're going to start off with recon enumeration. Very first thing you want to do is go ahead and give that host a ping. Obviously, we get some responses. I do want to point out just one thing. Pay attention to the TTL, time to live. Time to live of 63 is usually indicative of a Linux box. Time to live for 127, early 128 is indicative of Windows operating system. And then I believe time to live TTL 224 is indicative of a Cisco appliance, Cisco router switch. That's not to say that this is a Linux box, but I kind of hint to you what it may be. So verify that host is alive, so now we can begin with our enumeration. We're going to do a quick Nmap scan. You do a stealth scan. That's what the SS is for. And then copy this IP. What we're doing right here, the hack PN option is disabling ping. Second is PNS, and then disabling our stealth scan. Gotta throw sudo in the mix. Let's do this thing. Right off the bat, we get 3 services. Maybe we'll list those right off the bat. Right. So right off the bat, we get 3 services, ports that are open. We got TCP port 21 for FTP, TCP port 22 for SSH, and TCP port 80 for HTTP. These are pretty standard ports, but right off the bat, the ones that stand out the most would be port 21 FTP and port 80 HTTP. These stand out the most because FTP is one of the easier ports to enumerate pretty fast, and then HTTP could have a boatload of information. Website might be a vulnerable website. And so what we want to do is we want to follow what's called the principle of least privilege, where we're kind of probing or targeting the easiest ports first. And what we're looking for is easy wins. This is kind of like a low-hanging fruit type strategy. And so we're going to do that right now with FTP. I'm just going to do a quick FTP command to that IP. What we're going to want to do or check first is to see if anonymous is enabled. That room.
So should I put open?
Sorry, I had a long day at work. You've been kind of busy. But yeah, so with FTP, the very first thing you want to check, FTP 101, you want to go ahead and supply the anonymous password. Anonymous is a guest account that is enabled by default. It's a misconfiguration. Best practice is to either have this account disabled or FTP just close out altogether. In this case, FTP was enabled, so we went ahead and tried the anonymous password. This is password right here. Alright, anonymous username, anonymous password. That's what we do right here. And so you see here that we get a successful login for it. Pretty alarming stuff. That's what you don't want to see, especially in a production environment.
Please don't kill me. I'm a chicken.
Before I go into what lives there, if you hit the question mark, you see all of the native FTP commands. You got a whole bunch of commands that you can run within the FTP console. Do ls. And we know there's a file called backup.zip, some sort of zip file on the box. So let's go ahead and
can't do anything about it.
pull that file to our attack box. We use the git command. The git command basically downloads that file onto our attack host. And we see it right there. Understand that whenever you initiate FTP, and you download files, it's going to download files into the folder that you initiated FTP command. So if I was in my home directory, laptop FTP, I download the file, it's right there. So, since it is a zip file, we're going to go ahead and try to unzip it to see its contents. Oh no, there's a password. This is a password protected zip file. So, that's what the password is. But the only way we're going to open this zip file is if we supply it with the password, which we don't know yet. But that's okay. Luckily, we have John the Ripper. And so, John the Ripper is a password hashing or password cracking or hash cracking tool, similar to Hashcat that we can use to crack passwords. It also has a utility called zip2john that's exclusively for zip folders, zip files that are password protected. And so what we can do here is we can point the zip2john appliance to the backup.zip folder, and what we're doing here is pulling the hashes from this zip folder in an effort to crack those hashes and reveal a plain text password. So we run the zip2john command on the zip folder we just downloaded from the FTP, and we extract the hashes and append it to a file we call backup.php. Nonetheless, we now see that file, the original zip file and this backup.hash file. If we cat the backup.hash file, bam, these are the hashes for the zip file. This is what we're going to crack, all these hashes. Hopefully, after we crack these hashes, we'll get the plain text password and be able to unzip this guy. And to do this, we're going to use John again.
Are these a little
Wordless.
these a little
Wordless.
yeah.
You guys don't know what rockyou is? Study up on it. It's one of like the default password lists that there is. Has thousands, if not millions, of passwords. Oh, apologies. It's a gunzip folder, so I actually have to gzip it. So gzip or gunzip. Hold on 1 second. What is it? Let's see. Rockyou? Yeah. Or sudo. And sudo. You could just open up a elevated terminal. I have the bad habit of not doing it, and so I always run into these silly commands. Sorry. I'm sure I can actually open this word list. Share word list rockyou txt. All right, cool. Yeah. So basically, rockyou is just a giant word list with a bunch of well-known passwords. And so we're going to use this word list against the backup.hash file that we created in an effort to crack those hashes and reveal the plain text password. T. Run it against the backup.hash. Do not run it against the backup.zip. It's not going to do anything. Alright, looks like it's done. Just so you're understanding the syntax here, we're using just the John tool, not John2zip. We're using John tool, using the tech word list option, and then we're supplying it with the rockyou.txt word list with thousands of passwords, and then we're targeting the backup.hash file that we created earlier. Right here, it looks like we are successful in cracking the hash, and so apparently the password for the zip file is 741852963. Make note of that here. So let's go ahead and unzip backup.zip folder. Secure this password. Fingers crossed and down. Got a confirmation inflating. One section of 2 files, still within the backup file.zip folder, an index.php file, and style.css file. We see that right here. Bam, bam. What are these files? Well, let's see. Let's go ahead and open these files up. Index.php is usually indicative of like a website. Same thing with style.css. So it looks like just the source code for a website, color scheme, width, alignment, etc. Let's see what's in the index.php file. Same thing, configuration file, source code, MegaCorp login. It's kind of sus. Right here, you'll notice interesting entry. So this looks like a password field. Got a username admin, MD5 hash, and password. This right here looks to be an MD5 hash of some sort. What is it? I don't know. Let's find out. Assuming it is an MD5 hash, we can just drop it into this crack engine. If you Google search this, I mean, we could use John the Ripper too, but man, let's not make things difficult. I think it's called Crack Station. Forced. Oh my god. Yo, brother. Yo, my man, how many fire hydrants are there? Jesus Christ. Bro. Yes. Bear with me. Google always gets theirs. CAPTCHA always gets theirs. Remember that. So, fine. Right, so CrackStation is a free password cracking tool, hash cracker. Here are the hashes that it supports. See here, it's an MD5. You can crack MD5s. Assuming this is MD5, because it did say so here, right? MD5. Fingers crossed, hopefully this is a valid hash. Oh my god, Jesus Christ. Yeah, CAPTCHA. You're not getting past CAPTCHA. This is like the most secure freaking thing. There's no way to bypass this. Alright. Paste the hash, crack it. Let's see what it gives. Bam. Looks like this was indeed an MD5 hash. You can tell right here. Color schemes, green is an exact match. Successful entry, black, yellow, partial, red, NSTR. Nothing significant to report. MD5 hash. This is the password. Very strange. But let's write that down. RT, which is keyboard crawl, right? QWERTY 789. So we have here some credentials. What appear to be password credentials. Username is admin. Password is MD5 hash. We crack that hash. Resolves to this keyboard crawl. We go back earlier, recall that the site had HTTP enabled. So let's go ahead and see. Copy website. Look at that, MegaCorp login. Wouldn't be surprised if this is the login for the site. If you recall here in the PHP file where we found the credentials, I think I found something around here. Got to sign in. Somewhere around here said MegaCorp. Bam, right here. Look at that. MegaCorp login. Seems to be the config file for this page. Well, let's go ahead and plug in the username and the password you just found. Minimize this trash. Admin. Password. Bam. We're in. We are in the website. What it is, I don't know. Let's figure that out though. Remember, we're still in the reconnaissance and enumeration phase. It doesn't stop. So let's kind of gather ourselves here and see what we got. So this basic website doesn't have much functionality. Can't really do anything. No buttons available. Seems to be some sort of database. I'll go ahead and query some of these entries. Sandy. Okay. And so it's some sort of database. It looks like all you can do is query what's in the database. Mistake guy. Okay, I can't even do that. I can only query the names. Gotcha. I query patrol. I query patrol. Nada. It looks like all you can do, the only functionality you have here is you can search for the names. See here, I searched at the Pico name, and we pulled up the table. So this definitely is some sort of database. And so what we want to do is we want to do some fuzzing of the database, just to see if it's vulnerable to any potential SQL injection attacks. The easiest thing to do is just throw a column at it, see what it says. Alright, that's a column. Comma. Or single quote, sorry. The slave guys. Alright, so you throw a single quote, and right off the bat, we get an error right here. See here. Error. Unterminated quoted string at or near line 1. Select star on cars where name like %%. How about you? But that looks off. Looks like the web server doesn't understand query. When you get an error like this, it's usually indicative of some sort of vulnerability on the web server. Basically, it's trying to process a command, and it doesn't know how to process it. So that's bad. So let's move on and throw it. We call these test payloads. So they're like these little things that we do to throw off the server. So if you see right here, I did a thing. I did a single quote followed by 2 hyphens. If you notice, I didn't get an error this time. It displays the whole table, which means it's executing, which is bad. It's bad because we're passing over a comment, and it's not giving out any errors. So we can move forward and start to fuzz this a little bit more. See what kind of SQL injection it does have. Another test payload that we could throw at it. Use this one.
And
Single quote, space or single quote 1 equals 1. So this is what's called the Boolean Logic. Basically, it's a true or false statement. So 1 equals 1, and because of that, it processes the request. There's nothing it's trying to process, so it just goes by default and process the entire table. So this is called a Boolean Logic payload. It's one of the famous ones. You'll see it all the time whenever you start looking into SQL injection of vulnerabilities and attacks. So this is another way to confirm the vulnerability. My fault. Didn't realize it was so dark. Had to turn on the lights and that's sent to the kids. Anyways, back to the video. So the next step here is to identify the number of columns on this database. And so to do that, we're going to do what's called a union statement clause over here at the top. And what we want to do is we want to identify how many columns there are. You can substitute these numbers with literally anything you want, but the point we're trying to do is identify how many columns this database has. Once we identify how many columns this database has, then we can go ahead and supply it with the SQL commands. We're going to start off with 4 columns just because there are 4 columns visible here. We've got a name column, a type column, a fuel column, and an engine column. So we're going to go ahead and supply that. It's clearly trying to execute our commands because we're getting a SQL error. Errors are okay. They're not a bad thing. That means that it's trying to execute the commands, and so it's feedback that we can leverage to, re-engineer our attacks, if you will. So in this error, we see that it recognizes the union query, right? Error, each union query must have the same number of columns in line 1, etc. We try to guess there were 4 columns, as you see here, name, type, fuel, engine, and we guess wrong. That's okay. If we get errors, that is okay. We just keep going up. So if there were 4 columns, we're going to go to 5. This time we get a different error. Again, errors are okay. Helps us enumerate the task at hand. We get a different error this time. Error this time says union types characters varying. Sorry, it's so tiny the text I can barely see. And I don't have my glasses on. Union types character varying and integer cannot be matched. Line 1. And what that means is it doesn't understand the query. We're supplying it integers, and it doesn't understand how to process integers. So we go ahead and supply it with strings. Null is a valid SQL string, so we're going to go ahead and supply it with null entries in lieu of the integers. See what we get. Oh my goodness. I want to get rid of this keyboard. Oh, check that out. I messed one out. Hold on. I put 3 L's, I guess. I'll put 4 L's. Let's see. Union select 1 null, 2 nulls, 3 nulls, 4 nulls, 5 nulls. And enter. Bam. Alright, cool. Notice this time we don't get an error, and you'll actually notice, look at here at the bottom in between the Elixir and the Zeus entries, there's nothing. It's displaying nothing. It seems like it's looking for the null name, the null type, null field, etc. This is a good sign. This means that A, the database is vulnerable to SQL injection, and B, we can actually execute SQL commands on the backend server. So through the query function, we're instead of sending valid queries for like Laser or Sandy or whatnot, we're sending it commands that it's being processed on the back end and giving us what we're asking for. So we're going to use that same logic. We're going to use the null commands, right? Oh my god. Hold on. Let's copy and paste this trash. Right, we're going to use the null commands, and this time we're going to substitute one of these null entries with a SQL command. version. There you go. So if you look up here, we substituted one of the null entries with this version parentheses command. And what that does, it asks for the version of the database. And down here we see that it's Postgres SQL Server running on Ubuntu, which is Linux. So verify this indeed is a Linux box. Make note of the type of SQL Server that we're enumerating. In this case, we're targeting a Postgres SQL Server. That's important because there are different SQL servers, and different SQL servers have their own native commands. There are MySQL, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, etc. Postgres, obviously, for this lab is another flavor of SQL. It's important to know what type of SQL server you're targeting because they speak their own languages. Kind of like we speak English, there's French, Portuguese, Spanish, right? They have their own native tongues, and so if you're going to try to communicate with somebody in their own language, you better use their language, the right language to communicate. I'm not going to speak to someone, speaks French and English. They're going to look at me crazy and we're not going to understand each other. Same thing goes with this, right? We're running this version command is a Postgres SQL command. We're going to do another command right here. Current underscore user. Jack that one up. To continue to enumerate this box. Current underscore user. Actually, column. Bam. So in the first column we had the version command, and in the second entry we supplied it with the current underscore user command. And so we see that the commands that we're running through the SQL injection are being ran as a Postgres SQL service account. Low privileged user, but I think we have enough to get a foothold. So let's do that. So we have enough information to try to move forward with the attack, and we're going to try to get a foothold. For this step, we're going to be using a tool called SQLmap. And what SQLmap does, it automates all these manual SQL injections that we're trying to run manually, and it just automates them and just throws a whole bunch of commands at the server, and it tries to enumerate all the vulnerabilities, the databases, the tables, etc. Before we start that, though, we do have to supply SQLmap with some information. So we're going to do that right here. So first things first, the SQLmap needs to have valid URL, right? To start its search. Over here at the top, you see this whole URL. Dashboard.php is the actual script that is doing this query. So whenever you do a search in this little magnifying glass field, it's being executed by dashboard.php script. This is the input parameter. Key parameter, I don't know if I misspoke. This is the parameter search equals. That's actually what's actually conducting the search. So we're going to go ahead and supply it with a true positive elixir. So we have our test URL right here. This URL is what we're going to supply to SQLmap, so it has a baseline on where to start, if that makes sense. The next step is SQL map needs to authenticate to the website. If we just throw it this URL, it's probably going to fail out because it needs to authenticate. Remember that we have to log in as the admin user. So us supplying just the URL to the SQL map command or tool isn't going to work. It's going to fail, and you guys are going to be bashing your heads, not understanding why. Don't worry though, we can fix that right here. So what we did right here, we're going to go ahead and hit the developer tools. For Linux, it's the inspect Q button. Just right click on website, hit inspect Q, pull up the developer tools. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this. We're going to go over here to the storage tab, and then right here under cookies, right, we're going to focus on this value right next to the PHP session ID. This is a token that we're going to use, our cookie token, if you will, and we're going to supply this to the SQL map tool. And this is going to be the authentication piece that SQL map needs to use in order to authenticate to the site and actually query this URL over here at the top. So we need both these, the URL and the cookie token. So we're going to go ahead and fire up SQL map and see what we get. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste for my op notes because it is a rather long command. Follow me along with me. Here, gotta update the URL. Was it r10.129.153.70 10.129.153.70. All right. 10.129.153.170, 170, sorry, not 70, 170. And we're targeting the dashboard.php URL, and we're using the Elixir search. This is the cookie that I was talking about. The tag cookie option is the authentication piece for SQL map. So we're going to go ahead and supply it with this token. Don't mind. You see here, this was an old token from my last lab. Go ahead and supply it with the cookie token that we grabbed from the inspection tools. The TAC-P flag right here is the search function. DBMS is the type of database that it's targeting. Instead of having SQL map go through all the flavors of SQL, Microsoft SQL, MariaDB, Oracle, etc., we already know the type of SQL server we're attacking, so we just say, hey, this is PostgreSQL, go run. Batch command, I want to say that just auto answers the prompts. If I'm not mistaken, I can't remember off the top of my head what the batch command does. And then this is your moneymaker right here, the tag OS tag shell. That's going to drop us into a native shell in the database or on the server rather. So if all works as intended, we're going to fire this bad boy off. Notice right here that as it's going through its motions, SQL map will prompt you for questions. Again, that's what I want to say what the batch command is for. It kind of auto answers these for you. I'm going to go through the motions on trying to throw all kinds of like payloads and SQL injections. So we're going to fire this up and let it do its thing. Wow, it goes fast. Sure enough, get a confirmation up here of the SQL injections that it's doing. I got a time-based blindside SQL injection. Right here, SQL map identified the following injection points. Got a Boolean-based SQL injection, error-based, etc., etc. Again, this is where our moneymaker is. It's the OS shell. This is what we want. I can go ahead and run the ID command. And look at that. We have a shell. We are now on the server. You can see that you can run the commands through this shell. I run the ls command. I'm able to see what's on the back end. What's the host name? Vaccine, okay. It's the present working directory. We are in this directory. Everything's being ran in this directory. Again, IP, remember. So now we have initial access. And so we've moved on from phase 1, and we're now at phase 2 of the methodology. Remember phase 1, we did some recon and enumeration. We found vulnerable FTP server that had anonymous logon enabled. We were able to download that backup.zip file that was password protected, cracked it, found some credentials to the admin logon page, logged in, figured out it was a SQL database of some sort, had a SQL injection vulnerability. We went ham, exploited, and now we have our foothold. So we're gonna leverage this foothold and we're gonna build off of it. So rather than running any more commands here, one of the first things you want to do when you have a foothold like this is you want to upgrade to a better shell. Right now this is like I guess you could think of it as a dummy shell, a temporary shell, if you will. So it's not very reliable, and so what we want to do is we want to upgrade that to a full TTY. And we're going to do that here. We're going to go ahead and start up a netcat listener. Starting netcat listener over TCP port 3005. And over here on our temporary shell, we're going to do a callback to our IP. Our IP for our box is 10.10.14.144. Oops. Oh, crap. My apologies. 10.10.14.144. So we're basically spawning a bash shell, and we're calling back to our netcat listener. We're establishing a TCP shell over port 3005. We hit enter, and here we catch the other end of the shell. Where am I? Postgres. Present working directory. Great. So we successfully established a reverse shell, which is a little bit more reliable. But the work's not done yet. We still have some, I call it housekeeping that we have to do. And so what we want to do now is we actually want to upgrade to a full TTY shell. The purpose of the TTY shell is so that we have interaction with the console. A full TTY shell, if you run certain commands, it might prompt you for stuff, and you might not see those prompts unless you're in a full interactive shell. So commands like sudo, SSH, SU for like switch user, those type of commands, they generally prompt you for something, whether it be like a username, password, what have you. It'll prompt you for something, and so you won't see those prompts unless you upgrade your shell to a full TTY. And so that's what we're doing here. We're using Python. We're importing PTY, and we're spawning a bash shell. We do that. And we upgrade. So now we could do commands like sudo taco. And notice here we're being prompted. Now we have a more reliable shell. We don't have the password for the Postgres account. We just have to compromise it, but we don't have a password, so we gotta look for it. I don't know the password yet. Obviously that isn't the password. Try again. Still don't know. Whatever. The sudo command will let you see what kind of privileges the user that's running it has on the box. And so build this into your head the moment you get initial access. At least on a Linux box, the very first thing you want to do is check out its permissions to see what kind of permissions that account has. Of course, I get booted out of the shell, so I have to redo all this. But anyways, the sudo tacl command, the purpose of that is to see what kind of permissions you have on that box. Hold on for a second though. Let me reestablish this connection and I'll get back to you. So while I'm recreating this whole shell, remember the task at hand. The task at hand is to find the password for the Postgres account. Why? Because when we try to run the sudo tacl command, it's asking for a password. Before we do any enumeration, let's try to dig in to the box and see if we can find the password. I want you to make note of this file path. Since it is a website, memorize the /var/www/html file path. That's like the default root path for websites, and usually there's like a boatload of information. If you're lucky, you might find a configuration file that may or may not have password. So we're gonna go ahead and enumerate that web root path as soon as I reestablish my cat connection. So this isn't a very reliable shell. So we're in this directory, var lib postgres main. Let's go ahead and cd to var. And I'm gonna go to www, and we're gonna go into the HTML. Okay. Memorize this. This is the web root path. This is the default web root path that you want to enumerate every time you land on a web box. You can see here the dashboard.php is a configuration file that actually executes the search function on the main website. And so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and enumerate these files that exist. That makes sense. Since the dashboard.php, oh my god, I just realized this. Sorry. Since the dashboard.php is a script that executes the search function, let's enumerate that first. So what we're doing now is on the back end, we're opening up this dashboard.php script since we have access to the server. And this is all the logic behind that script, the logic behind the query that we're doing. And if you look right here, something stands out. We got another set of credentials. Got the user Postgres, which is the account that we compromised through the SQLi injection, and we actually have the password. It looks like this is the password for the Postgres account. Go ahead and write that down. Postgres. So Postgres is the service account. We already know this because the sqlmap shell automatically drops us into the web server, and we're already logged in as Postgres. So let me go ahead and see if we can actually SSH. Remember that SSH is also enabled on this box. So I wonder if we can actually SSH as the service account. I wouldn't be surprised if we can't, but let's give it a shot nonetheless. Get into the habit of writing your notes down in like a WordPad so you're not having to scramble all the time. Oh my god. All right. So it looks like we can SSH into the box, and we did. I was just going to say, forget about this web shell because they're unreliable, and clearly it dropped me out on its own. So that can go F itself. We have credentials now. Great. So we're now SSH'd into the target 10.129.153.170. Awesome. We're SSH. Still low privilege users, as you can tell by the $sign. $sign is a low privilege user. Our focus now is step 3, and that is to priv-esc, post exploitation / privilege escalation. And in this phase, what we want to focus on is persistent and ultimately privilege escalation. If you're on a Linux box, your goal is to get the root account. If you're on a Windows box, your goal is to get to a system account, super user account, or if you're in an AD environment, you're trying to get to a domain admin or some sort of admin that has administrative rights over the entire domain. But that's for another lesson. We'll talk about that later. For this lab right now, we're focusing on elevating to the root account. So let's do that right here. So now that we have more reliable shell and we have credentials for the Postgres account, we're going to go back and try to run the sudo tac-l command to see what permissions the Postgres account actually has. Again, sudo will prompt you for the user's password. Thankfully, we have that now. So we can supply it. And here are the permissions that Postgres has on this box called vaccine. These are the permissions right down here. You'll notice that we can run the vi command. It looks like we can only run that vi command on a configuration file, specifically on this configuration file called pg_hba.conf. And that configuration file looks like it's located here in this etc postgres 11 May directory. Understand what we see here. vi is a text editor native to Linux, text editor just like Nano or Vim, I guess, vi. And so what you use this text editor for is to create scripts, kind of like the way you would in PowerShell with PowerShell ICE. You can create scripts on Linux, create programs, type code, all that stuff. And also you can spawn shells, interactive shells within the vi text editor. And so when you're running commands as sudo, understand that you are running commands as the privileged root user. So that's the biggest takeaway here is any permissions you have here will be ran as root. And that's what we're going to utilize here today to escalate ourselves to the root user. The way we're going to do that is by leveraging the vi command, and we're going to drop ourselves into a root shell. Understand that based on the rules, we can only use vi when we're opening up this specific configuration file. We can't use sudo vi rather to open up, something else. So we could test it right here. Sudo vi, whatever. You get the error right here. Sorry, user Postgres is not allowed to execute vi test, which is a script that I was trying to create as root. Got it. You got to stick to the rules of engagement, right? So we'll do that right here. We're going to go ahead and do sudo. And so because we have sudo privileges, we have to preface each command as sudo. So we're going ahead sudo, right? Sudo command that we're allowed to run. In this case is vi. And we're going to go ahead and open up this. I'm going to give it the full file path of the configuration file. Bam. So now we opened up this configuration file and we're running it as root. What do we do? So remember what I said, vi is a text editor. this is configuration file, and so this is where you can create commands and script and all that. You hit the I key, you're in insert mode, and so you can script, type commands, whatever you want to do. I'm not going to do that here though. It also has the capability of dropping into an interactive shell. That's one of its native features, and so we're going to do that. And to do that, we're going to hit the escape key, right? And then we're going to type this command right here. And what we're doing right now, we're engaging with we're entering what's called interactive mode, or active mode rather. When we hit the escape key, we're outside of the insert mode, right? This is insert mode. We can type stuff, program, whatnot. The moment we hit the escape key, we're in VI's active mode. And so we're going to go ahead and write this little syntax right here, bin bash. And all that is we're spawning bin bash. We're spawning a bash shell. Hit enter, and look at that. We are now root. It's that easy. I can now do whatever we want. Etsy Shadows a lockdown file. Has the password hashes for every account on a Linux box. It's locked down to only admins, or in this case, root. We have full access now. So we're having some get flagged here. Yeah. We successfully escalated privileges to the root account. So how do we do this? Let's back up real quick. Okay. I exited that root shell, and we're back on the text editor, right? Here we have VI, the text editor, opening up a configuration file, and it's running as root. So the moment we spawn the interactive shell, because VI's already opened as root, it automatically drops us into that root shell. Hit Q. Oh, sorry, keep banging. We're back as Postgres. Again, the admins that trying to lock down sudo, they had good intentions, but unfortunately they missed this, and so it's a real world thing that I've seen a lot of past. They were trying their best to lock down the VI command, lock it down just for this specific configuration file, which they did. The only difference is that the moment you open it up, all you have to do was enter active mode and literally just ask for a shell, and now we self-elevate. So I say that because people think that pen testing is a lot of like these 0-day vulnerabilities, and you have to create these crazy payloads and exploits and programs. You really don't. Half the time, if you just have a really good methodology and you could leverage bad practice, 9 times out of 10 you'll be able to find a foothold using living off the land techniques, just native commands. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We didn't do anything crazy here. All we did was enumerated this box. Box had, see where it is. Well, this box had 3 ports open, right? I already figured out the IP for this guy. Oh my God. See. Right, so the way we started this engagement, we started off with step 1, recon, enumeration. We did a port scan on this IP, saw 3 services open, TCP, port 21, 22, port 80, FTP, SSH, HTTP. We went ahead and enumerated the FTP server, found out that anonymous was enabled by default, which was bad. We were able to log in, pull a backup.zip file, found out it's password protected, cracked the password, logged in, or rather unzipped that folder, pulled a configuration file, found some credentials to the login page, posted on HTTP port 80, able to log into the admin page, found out it was a database, and a database that was vulnerable to a type of SQL injection, a union-based SQL injection. Went ahead and performed a SQLi attack, dropped ourselves into a shell, gaining us access to the box. And then from there, we did some post-exploitation techniques where we upgraded our shell to a full interactive shell and found other credentials for the actual Postgres service account. And, just using living off the land techniques, we were able to find the permissions for that Postgres account. Turned out it had VI text editor permissions that we ran as root. And we dropped ourselves into a root shell, and yeah, we got this box pretty easy stuff. If you break down all the steps into little pieces, it's a lot easier. Don't look at the big picture, just get like a holistic view of the engagement, but then break it down and go through each motion systematically, piece by piece. So there you have it, guys. That was my guided walkthrough. I'm sorry if it took so long. It's been a while. Went longer than I expected it to. I know I talk a lot. I just want to give you guys the full scope of the walkthrough, give you guys as much detail as possible, just so you guys are better equipped and better prepared to, do these kind of activities on your own. For my school community members, you will have access to my op notes that kind of goes over everything that we did here today. You have the full command syntax, the methodology, and the why I ran each command. Don't go ahead and just copy and paste the commands as I'm doing it. You need to put some thought into it. Understand what you're running, why you're running, and what the next steps are. If you just go ahead and start copying and pasting, you're not doing anything. You got to put some thought in these engagements. So use the op notes provided in the school community as a reference, but get into the habit of creating your own operator notes. As you go through these types of engagements, create your own op notes, take notes of all the commands you're running, understand what they're doing, understand why they're doing it, and start getting into that habit. This will lead into step 4, which is the reporting phase, right? The reporting / documentation phase. So what's the next steps? Well, all right, if this was a real engagement, we already compromised this Linux box. It was a web server. All right, how do we do that? Well, if you fall back on your operator notes is what's going to feed into the final report. And so in the final report, you're going to go ahead and give those operator notes so that the admins that have to remediate the box, they can replicate and find the choke points that they have to fix, if that makes sense. Provide screenshots as you create these operator notes so you can, reference and guide yourself. I'll try to create a video for how to report, but when you create the report, you want to be as detailed as possible. You don't want to just throw your operator notes. You want to add some context. So you want to say, hey, this box had 3 vulnerabilities or whatever. These were the vulnerabilities. In this case, we found a vulnerability where it had FTP enabled. Well, FTP shouldn't be enabled. I don't think so, at least. That's an unsecured, unencrypted port. And it had anonymous access. So that's a vulnerability in itself because it allowed us to pull the backup.zip file that had credentials, which, by the way, the fact that it was credentials in plain text in an FTP server is another vulnerability in it of itself. So that's another finding. The SQL injection, that's a vulnerability in it itself. We were able to leverage sqlmap to get a foothold. That would be a finding in the report. The fact that we were able to escalate privileges from Postgres to root because of the loose VI permissions that sudo gave us. The sudo permissions on that Postgres account, that's a vulnerability in itself, a finding. And so right off the bat, just summarizing what we did, we got 4 findings. And, we could go ahead and leverage AI to speak to these findings and why they're bad. And then we can assess it and give it, a CVE score, a CVSS score, and kind of build that why and present it to the decision makers and say, hey, you might want to focus on addressing these vulnerabilities because they may lead to this type of exploit. And this is what you can do if you are elevated as root. So that's a little bit of context on how to report. I'll see if I make a video on reporting later. It's not fun, but you got to do it. That's the end state here. Is half the battle is knowing how to pen test. The other half is articulating your attack and presenting that to decision makers. So, they understand why we're doing it, how we did it, and it really brings value to the overall engagement. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. Again, I'm going to drop the operator notes in the school community for my YouTube viewers. If you haven't joined, go ahead and join the school community and the link below. I talk about pen testing and provide some lessons on how to do it. If you liked the video, please give me a like and subscribe. If you didn't like the video, please critique my work. Drop some comments in the comment section. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like. I know this is a long ass video. I apologize. It's just I'm trying to get you as much information out there as short as possible. Also, if you don't mind, drop on the comments other videos that you'd like me to post, and I'll do my best to post those videos. I do focus on pen testing, but I know there's a lot of asks for blue team stuff. I'm an incident response guy myself, so if you want some blue team type videos, I could post that as well. But other than that, I'm going to close this out. I'm tired. I got another work trip tomorrow. Anyways, it's your boy Jimmy, aka The Truth. Welcome to Run-DMZ, and I'll see you guys next time.
Here.